Good evening, all. Today we are going to see about the topic quantum computing. So, we are going to see the introduction of quantum computing today. Initially, let us all understand the very buzzword called as quantum. A quantum is nothing but it is a discrete natural unit. Any unit it can be, provided it has to emit a charge. It can be either a packet or it can be a natural unit, but it has to emit a charge. That is called as quantum in physics. So the main thing which we are going to see today is what is the need of quantum computing and what are qubits which actually supports quantum computing. So quantum computers has a very large potential when we compare it to today's classical computers or supercomputers. Comparably, it will act and simulate things in a very giant manner which we do not even imagine. It doesn't mean that the quantum computer is going to replace everything, every classical computer we have. It doesn't mean it. Rather, all the operations which are data enormous, data rich, can be easily solved by using quantum computing technology, since the computation is going to be much more faster and efficient. Example: imagine we have two people to be seated for a dinner party. How many possible combinations are there? We all can easily answer two combinations, which means 2 factorial ways. Suppose if we have 5 people to be seated, then we have 120 combinations, which means 5 factorial way. The same thing when it comes to 10 people, you can see how big the number is. The number actually is 36 lakh 28,800 possible combinations are there. So when we want to simulate, when we want to show all the possibilities of seating arrangement, then you can imagine how much a classical computer will take to solve, how much time a classical computer will take to solve this problem. So now initially, before understanding quantum computing, we are going to see first what is a classical computer, how does it works, so that we can smoothly have a transition from classical computing to quantum computing. So we all know that the famous bit concept, which is binary digit 0 and 1, anything can be represented as zeros and ones in a normal computer, which means any character, a number, or a special character will be defined by using zeros and ones. So when we want to do any operation, the operation will be processed by the so called processor. The processor will be embedded with billions and millions of transistors today. So the number of transistor, when it becomes more, then automatically the efficiency and the speed of the calculation will get increased. So when we talk about transistors embedded in a chip, we all immediately come through one idea, which is called as the famous Moore's law. So 1965, Moore proposed that the total number of transistors in a chip will be doubling each year. This actually happened up to 2013 to be precise. Once after 2013, the Moore's law has started to break out. So you can see this graph, it clearly states that from 1900 to 2013, until we get this Core i7 processor, it was possible to increase the amount of transistors to embed in a chip by two times. Actually, it is possible. But after i7, it is not possible. Actually, this Moore's law has not happened at this way as Moore has stated. So why actually this breakdown happened is because these three primary reason: one is electrical leakage, second one is processing power, and processing power, which means the processing power is not as increased as Moore states. Second, the third one is economics. Economics in the sense that suppose we are building a supercomputer with more number of processors, which contains billions of transistors, then automatically the cooling unit has to be ready, since the computation, compute data rich computation requires a lot of heat to be emitted, right? So when we come to the decreasing the size of transistors, when the transistor size gets decreased by nanometers, automatically the era of quantum computing arises. Let us see again this in detail. First, this is a transistor. When we want electricity to be passed like this, then automatically it will be of on state, which is represented as bit 1. Suppose we want to stop this, then it will become bit 0. So when we have a single transistor, it will become two representations, either a 0 bit or a 1 bit. When we have two transistors like this, then we will be having possibly four combinations. Similarly, when the number of transistor gets increased, the number of combinations also will get increased. Applying this on a logical gate, your computer, normal computer, classical computer, is possible of performing addition and multiplication operation, which is the backbone of any such operation. Any new operation or any advanced operation will be performed only with these two basics, addition and multiplication. So let us see what is a tunnel effect, and then I'll say what actually, where actually the importance of tunnel effect comes. So imagine we have some electron gun which is emitting lot of electrons, or electricity is being passed. If your barrier is too big, or if the barrier is big in such a way that it prevents the flow of electricity, then it is possible for us to have an on and off state. You can see when a quantum object is sent to a thick barrier, then it will bounce off, it will come back. If the barrier, suppose it is thin enough, the object may sometimes escape to the other side. Here is the actual problem of our Moore's law. When the transistor becomes thinner and thinner and thinner, electricity is being escaped to the other side. So the state of zero is become impossible in that case. So the conclusion is, the more thinner the barrier, the more likely the object to get passed through the other side. This actually comes as the major problem in satisfying the Moore's law. When we decrease the amount or the size of transistor into nanoscales, this problem has been erased, which has called as the tunnel effect. You can see when you make a metal which is made up of quantum atoms, if we approach it with a very thin tip which is electrically powered, automatically it is tearing down the electrons. This actually is called as the tunnel effect. Right. So next is actually, until now we have seen why this Moore's law has failed and why it is not possible for us to construct a processor with more number of transistors, which will automatically increase the power of computing in the classical computer. That is what we have seen until now. So now coming to the answer of why not supercomputers are equal to quantum computers, the answer is very simple. So the real world problems are becoming so big, such that only using the classical computers, it is impossible for us to solve them within a stipulated time or within a desired time. So, for example, there is a very famous example which is called as Grover's search. If we want to search one data out of 1 trillion data, then our classical computer may take about a week actually. But when you do the same with the quantum computer, it will just take a second. Let us see how it is possible. So now, until now, we have discussed about the classical computing and how it has been performed. Now we are slowly progressing through understanding of how a quantum computer actually works. The quantum computer actually works on qubits. To understand qubits, it is not necessarily that we have to go directly to learn qubits. Rather, we have to understand the basic physics behind the quantum computing, and then slowly we can progress through understand the working of qubits. Initially, we should understand an atom. Atom is nothing but, we know it is the very basic unit of everything. So when you consider atom, you have subatomic particles like this, which has been listed here. We have protons, we have neutrons and electrons. So these are called as subatomic particles, where your quantum physics actually is going to discuss about all these subatomic particles. A normal physics law will not be obeyed by the subatomic particles. So this may wonder you, but still this is the truth. So when you take physics in subatomic level, automatically some laws are being broken out, or those laws are actual barriers of this subatomic particles. So let us understand how these subatomic particles are going to work in a quantum computing. As we have already discussed in the first slide, a quantum is nothing but it is a very, very discrete unit which contains some physical property. So this quantum can be anything. It can be any atomic or subatomic particles which has been listed here. Either it can be an electron, or it can be a neutron, or a photon. So when it comes to subatomic level, when you want to measure the location, it is impossible for us to locate a electron which is running around an atom. Suppose if we take a hydrogen atom, it is impossible for us to locate it correctly. It actually looks like a cloud. Let us see that also in the progressing slides. So we are going to learn subatomic level. So quantum computers here, they will be using this subatomic particles or atoms for their calculations. So normally we will say the classical bit is either a 0 or 1, which means an on and off state. But rather this quantum particle will not be only in these two states. It can be beyond these two states, which means it can be in any state. It has multi-dimension. It has more than two states, just not two states. More than two states our quantum computer will be working on. That is why it is possible for the quantum computers to run many calculations at the same time. Why we are going to quantum computing? Why? Because we know that when multiple operations is performed simultaneously, then the result will be even quicker. We get the results even quicker. So that is why we are moving to this quantum computing. Actually, it is going to work in the subatomic level, where your subatomic level particles will not explicitly stay in one particular state. Rather, it will be lying in the same time on many states. This probably may be weird, but still, a simple example for this is when we toss a coin, when we flip a coin, before the coin reaches back to your hand, it will be on air. While it was in air, we cannot say the exact state of the coin. It can either be head, or it can be a tail, or it can be in any degree. Similarly, we cannot tell the exact state of a quantum particle. Suppose if we take a normal a blade, when we simulate it, when we sting it, the blade will not stay. It will keep on reflecting. Right? It will be keep on moving until it reaches a particular state. That actually is the state of a particle, a subatomic particle. It will not be in one particular state, which means when we understand, it will be in more than one state in a particular time period. So this actually derives us to this quantum computing technology. So as we have discussed earlier, why we are moving is why we are moving, because we want to solve multi-dimensional problems. Multi-dimensional spaces are possible only with this quantum subatomic particles. That is why we are moving to this. So a size of a quantum computer is normally, it is like a domestic fridge, right? Or it can be a wardrobe. So until now we have discussed the basics of it. What is an atom and what are the subatomic particles? Now we are going to see three essential topics which is needed for us to understand the operation of qubits. So we are going to see all these slides only to understand how a qubit actually works. So those three properties are superposition, entanglement, and quantum interference. Let us see this one by one. Initially, the heart of the quantum computer is nothing but it is a qubit. So the qubit is going to store the information in the quantum form. But how it is possible? We are just going to see the answer for all these things. First, a qubit is nothing but the basic unit of information, like a bit in a classical computer. A bit can be either 0 or 1, or but when you come to a qubit, it can be in the superposition of all the possible states. We cannot exactly measure actually the qubit state. It is possible for us to derive or to tell how many superpositions or how many states a qubit can be. So this diagram illustrates how the classical bit looks like and how a quantum bit is. So quantum bit, clearly you can see in this picture, it will be there in multi-dimensional space. It can be located in more than one places. When you see this, you can understand. Now, the first thing which we have to understand about this qubit is wave particle duality. What is wave particle duality? Suppose if we take a matter in nature, either it can be in a particle form or it can be in a wave form. Meaning, if you take a marble or if you take a stone, you can understand that it is in a particle form. When we take a ball, when we throw it, when we hit it on the wall, the ball will come back to your hand. That is a particle form. It can be of anything. It can be a ball, it can be a grain, it can be an atom, anything. Suppose if we take consider waves. Waves are nothing but simply ripples which are generated by a pond, or the waves which are generated in a sea or a ocean. You cannot exactly say where it is. It can be in many places. We cannot exactly tell it. The wave does not exactly act like a particle. We cannot exactly locate it. But in quantum computing, one simple matter will act as both wave and as a particle. Here is the actual what to say, the actual beauty of quantum computing comes here. So let us see a video to understand this wave particle duality. This experiment has been performed to show us how a quantum object is being acting as a wave and as a particle in the same time. Imagine you have the electron gun over here, and the electrons are being shooted out on this particular place where it contains two slits. right? So initially a particle, how it will behave. If it is a particle, if electrons are particles, then how it will behave? It will escape through these two slits and it will get uh, deposited over here, right? Let us see it. You can see the particles are sent to through two slits and it is being touching the screen randomly and depositing. Now this is the second case where how waves are going to be operated. Suppose if you have a wave here, if the electron is considered as a wave, then this is how it will be deposited, like fringes on the screen. Now, really, we are coming to the third interesting part. The third part is how a quantum object actually behaves. Like you can see when a quantum object is being sent on two slits, you can see the beauty. Actually, what is happening here is the quantum object is sent through the slits. Actually, it has been sent as a wave, but when it is getting deposited on the screen, when it is touching the screen, it is reduced into a particle. Here you can see it is reduced into a particle. So now you can see how the fringes has been deposited as the particles in the screen. Now even more something weird is going to happen when you add an observer to this entire experiment. What is happening? So until now in this experiment we have seen both as the wave and as the particle, the quantum object or an object is equally passing through two slits. But rather when actually you add an observer, you can understand that the wave is actually being passed through any one of the slits. It is not equally getting transmitted to two slits. So this is wave particle duality. Any quantum object for that matter will act as both a wave and as a particle. The second concept which we are going to see is called as entanglement. Entanglement is again is a wonderful concept. We are going to have two objects from a same source. The two objects or the particles will be mathematically bound together using their any qualities, any of their qualities or characteristics, where between the two particles a beautiful interaction will happen. That interaction we cannot explicitly see, we cannot explicitly measure that interaction. The interaction will happen in the speed of multiple times how the light travels or the sound travels. Let us see it. So first, you have to understand how the electrons spin, which we have discussed previously. When you take a hydrogen atom and when you understand or when you want to locate a particular electron in the atom, it is not possible for us exactly because it is not actually like this, but rather it is like this. It is of it is a cloud formation, it is a cloud like formation. In that speed your electron would spin, you cannot exactly locate the particular place of the electron which is spinning around the hydrogen atom. So entanglement is when you are going to keep a pair of a particle, suppose two electrons or to any two quantum particles in different rooms or in different sides of the universe, the particles will be connected, and that connection property is called as entanglement. How it is connected in the sense that suppose if one electron which we keep on one end of the universe is spinning upwards, the other electron which we have kept in the other end of the universe will spin downwards only. So this has been proved by scientists. This is possible even if you keep 200 kilometers 750 miles apart. When you place the entangled objects, it will behave in that way only. So you can see this is one particle and this is other particle from the same source. When one particle is spinning upwards, the other particle will spin downwards only. Rather, we don't know what is the communication exactly happening in between them. So to prove this, there is a very famous experiment called the Schrödinger's cat experiment. This physicist have performed one experiment. He has imagined that there is a cat which is placed inside a sealed box, and there is a poisonous gas which is placed inside the box. Whereas you keep two electrons inside the box, which has one electron will upspin, the other electron will downspin. Only if the electron spins upwards, the poison will be removed, which means the poison will be passed through the cat and it will die. So the probability of the cat to be die and alive is exactly 50-50 percentage, which means when the poison is getting released, the cat will die. So when you open a box, if the cat is alive, then the other box which has been kept anywhere, even on the opposite side of the universe, the cat will be dead. So this is called as the Schrödinger's experiment, where inside the box, the probability of the cat which is alive or dead is 50-50. We don't know in what state it is. The next important thing is superposition. Superposition is nothing but when the cat remains in the box, we don't know its state, right? It can be dead, or it can be alive, or it can be struggling for its life, or it can be very patient. It can be anything. So all these possible states are called as superposition. Now you may have a question in your mind. Please stop this. What are we learning all these for? We are learning this only to understand how exactly the qubits are working. Only if you understand all these concepts, then the qubit operation or the working will be very clear for you. So the quantum theory describes every particle like the cat, right? It can be one or it can be another at the same time. Many world. This is an interesting concept. Suppose the quantum theory is exactly working. If it is correctly working, then it is we are predicting that people are predicting that more than one world is possible. A human, a particular human, how he is reacting in one world, in the opposite world or the opposite universe, he will react in a different way for the same problem. So if the many world idea is true, then the particle might be in one place in this world, and when you take the other world, it will be in other place. Right? So this is also an interesting concept when it comes to the quantum theory. We have seen many films also, right? Parallel world films, right? The tangled up particles, when we come to the conclusion of understanding a qubit, we have to understand entanglement and superposition completely. Entangled particles work like coins, right? So when we entangle two photons, right, then the photons will be sent to the lab which is present in different cities. Say one is in Mumbai, another one is in Bangalore. Then when you measure one photon as a particular time, in a particular time, the other one will be the opposite of it. right? We the particles behave in such a way that they are sending some signals within them, exactly the opposite way the particles will behave, even though it is separated in kilometers. How many kilometers? Even at the end of the universe it is possible. So quantum interference is the intrinsic behavior of qubits, how actually a qubits is performing. Only if we understand qubits, we can program a quantum computer. A bit is something which is logical. We cannot physically see a bit in a classical computer. Rather, a quantum computing's qubit is physical one. We can design qubits only after understanding all these concepts. So a single qubit, if you take, it can represent 1 or 0 or any superposition states. Right? So a pair of qubits, it can be represented by a quantum superposition of 4 states, and 3 qubits, any superposition of 8 states. So any possible combination of 8 states. So in general, when you take a qubit, it can work in a superposition possibility of 2 power n different ways or n different states simultaneously. So when we are going to operate on a qubit, the quantum gate is very similar to a logic gate, which will work like a logic gate specifically for quantum computers. So using this qubit and the quantum gates, we will be able to program a quantum computer. So the physical representation of a qubit is anything. It can be either photon or it can be a nucleus, anything. So how it will work? Okay, until now some concepts has been discussed. I don't know how far it has been reaching you, but still, quantum computing is going to the concept is going to be worked with the basis of a qubit. When you take a qubit, the qubit will have these three things. So when you want to design a quantum computer, you have to design in such a way that qubits has to be placed in a quantum computer physically. The area that houses the qubits, that accommodates the qubits. Second, we should have the method for transferring the signal to qubits, because then only the superposition state will happen, the entanglement will happen. We have to send the signals between the qubits. The third thing is we need a classical computer to run the program. Automatically here it comes to picture. So we do need a classical computer to run a program. So these three are the fundamental things when we want to design a quantum computer. So how this entanglement will happen? It will happen in different ways. So when you want to store a qubit, for some methods, when you want to store the qubit is kept at a temperature which is just above absolute zero. Right? And to reduce the coherence and reduce the interference, because we know that it is a subatomic particle, even a small vibration which will happen is going to disturb the entire calculation. So it will collapse it. So we have to be very careful. So other types of qubit housing is also there. We can place a vacuum chamber and minimize the vibrations, and we can stabilize the qubits. And the signals, as we have discussed in the previous slide, we have to pass a signal between the qubits that can be sent using variety of methods. We have different methods, either using microwaves or using laser and so on. So you can see this, right? This is the actual representation of how qubits can be in different states. So, okay, what is the actual application of quantum computers as of now? It is still in nascent stage. Google and IBM already claims that they have built probably super quantum computers. So those are used in these areas: quantum machine learning, simulation, cryptography, search optimization, and so on. So I think as of now, you can understand what is the basic of a quantum computer, how qubits are being working. So when you want to build a quantum computer, it is must that we have to understand the qubit concept. So here I have already opened you IBM Quantum Lab, which is available for us, which is given by IBM. So it is free of cost. when you would like to program, you can program this easily by having an IBM account. It is free of cost. Yes, as we have discussed, now we are going to write a small quantum circuit using this IBM Quantum Lab. So initially, we are going to build the circuit. First, we have to initialize two qubits in the zero state and two classical bits in the zero state. So we are going to define a circuit for that like this. You can see circuit is equal to quantum circuit 2 comma 2. Before this, actually, we would like to import Qiskit. This is how we will import. Let us try running this code and check whether it runs. Yet, yes, it runs properly. So as for now, we have just initialized two qubits in zero state and two classical bits in zero state. And then we have to add the gates similar to logical gates. Here we have a special gate which is called as Hadamard gate, which acts as a quantum gate for performing quantum operations. So for performing that, we would be writing the next line of code, which is circuit dot h of 0, where this h denotes the gate which we have created for our quantum circuit. Next, we are going to have one important task, which is we are going to perform a NOT operation, which will control the qubit either to 0 or to 1 in an entangled state. So for that operation, we are going to write the next line, which is circuit dot cx is equal to 0 comma 1. This we can execute and see. Right. The next line which we are going to write will perform one operation where it will contain two arguments. The line which we are going to write now, which is quantum circuit dot measure of 0 comma 1 comma 0 comma 1. So what actually this line will do is it contains two arguments. The first argument indexes the qubit and the second argument indexes the classical bit. So the nth qubit's measurement result will be stored actually in the nth classical bit. So let us execute this and check. So until now it is working correctly. Now we are going to add, okay, I think I have done a mistake. Yes, when you write the code, just be careful. It is just circuit. The quantum circuit's name which we have given is circuit. So it is circuit dot measure. Right. So nextly, what we have to do is we have to execute the experiment. For that, we have to use a simulator. So simulator, which we have to use a simulator, which is called as QASM simulator. So before you use the simulator, it is we have to do one thing. We have to, here you can see, we have to get the simulator using this line. Simulator is equal to, it is coded simulator is equal to, because only all that we can do is we can simulate, we can just simulate and see. So AER dot get underscore backend of QASM sorry underscore simulator. It should be small letter. That's all. So once we have done this, we are checking. So now the simulator object contains the Quasar simulator. Now we have to execute it. For executing a circuit on the Quasar simulator, we have to give a name. So my name, the name which I have given is job. Job is equal to, I'm calling the execute method. Inside the execute method, I'm going to give circuit, comma simulator, comma how many shots I would be giving is equal to 1000. Okay, so as of now, what we have done is we can do the experiment, we can conduct it either in a physical quantum system or in a simulator. So now it is possible only to execute in a simulator. So for this, we are going to use just very limited resources. So here, this Qiskit AER is a simulator which provides various backends. We can achieve various types of simulations using this. So every of the circuit will yield or will achieve either 0, 0 or 1, 1. So what is the use of this shorts argument? It means that it will specify how many times to run the circuit exactly. So the default number, if you do not mention anything like 1000, then the defaultly the value will be 1024. So it is not needed to execute explicitly mention this as 1000. If you want, you can mention how many times you would like to run. Otherwise, it will take 1024. So once after you do this, you do everything, then we have to store the result in one object which is called as the result object. The result object is going to store the result of the job which we have now executed. After doing this, we are going to do one more task, which is we are going to access the total number of counts which we have mentioned, right? 1000. So this many number of counts will be, the results will be acquired and stored in an object which is called as counts, where you will be doing this using the get underscore counts method. You will have to pass the actual circuit which you have created as a parameter. Next, finally, we are going to print the total number of counts for 0, 0 and 1, 1 which we have received. So for that, we are going to use a print statement. So the print statement is going to tell you the total number of counts. You can see for 0, 0 it is 1000. Now we will be analyzing, visually seeing the circuit which we have created. So for visualizing it, we have to import it. The visualizer has to be imported from IBM underscore quantum underscore widgets import something which is called as draw circuit. After importing it for this draw circuit method, we are going to pass the circuit which you have created. So now we have created the circuit named circuit. So it is telling me an error. Widgets, I have done a spelling mistake, sorry. When it is telling me draw underscore circuit is not being, again spelling mistake. Right. So here you can visualize the circuit which we have created, right? So what we have done now for your idea, I'll tell you again. So you can visualize using different tools, using different styles. Here we are visualizing like this, right? So the circuit which we have created will be visualized using a draw underscore circuit method. In the circuit, we have qubits which are ordered with 0, and at the top the qubit, you have, here you can see you have two representations, right? So these two representations mention that the qubits are ordered with qubit 0 at the top and qubit 1 below it. So we have to read the circuit from left to right. So which means the time passes through this operation. When you create a circuit, the time passes like this. So initially it is from left to right. When you want to visualize it, we are going to visualize it using the draw underscore circuit method. So we have done so far. Now finally we are going to plot the histogram of how many zero zeros and how many one ones we can get. So for that we are going to give plot underscore histogram of the circuit name, sorry, the count. We have stored the counts in the variable sorry, in the object called as counts. So here plot underscore histogram is not defined. So we have to define this plot underscore histogram. We have to import it and then we can visualize it. So once you import and visualize it, we can see the output. Let me do the import for you. Here you can see we have to import the histogram like this. I have to do the same here. So once I have imported, you can see, so everything, all the possible combinations here is 0 0. All 1000 possible combinations are 0 0. In this case, previously I have done a program. You can see here the probability of getting 0 0 is 0.483 and the probability of getting 1 1 is 0.517. So it varies every time when you run a simulator, when you execute a simulator. Here the same thing which I'm going to execute now. You can see the count. So the count is getting varied every time, right? So this is the very basic, whatever we have seen is the very basic of how to understand qubits. And every time when you would run a simulator, how you will create qubits and how you will create a quantum circuit. Actually, whatever I have given you, told you, is just a basic, very basic introduction of quantum computing. Thank you all for listening to me patiently so far. Thank you very much. Have a happy learning. Thank you.